Thank you, Vicki. Thank you, Lori. Thank you to the Norwalk Public Library for hosting this job search series. As Vicki mentioned, I'm Lauren Rosenkrantz. I'm a career coach that specializes in working with college students, recent grads, and young professionals. And I'm so happy today to be covering interviewing skills because I think this is one of these topics where it's a lifelong skill. It's one that you can continue to learn and improve upon your ability to answer interview questions, to prepare for interviews. And as Vicki said, I'll take questions. I'll stop a few times during the presentation, see if there's questions in the chat. If at any time you have trouble either seeing the presentation or hearing me, please unmute yourself and let me know right away, and I'd be happy to address the issue. So this topic is an interesting one in these times because typically when I prepare for an interviewing workshop, all about preparing for that in-person interview. So I did make sure today we're going to cover how to prepare for both a virtual or an in-person interview, because I am hopeful and positive that one day we'll be back to that. But a lot of these strategies can be applied to both scenarios. But if you have questions at any point, again, you can ask, and I'd be happy to address them. So let's get started. The first tip or strategy that I recommend to all of my clients is to develop a 30-second pitch. So a 30-second pitch, also known as an elevator pitch, is a summary of your skills and accomplishments. And I just want to take a moment to explain where the term elevator pitch comes from, because it's maybe not one that you're familiar with. So just imagine that you're stepping into an elevator in an office building, back when we used to do that, or an elevator on your college campus. And the doors close, and you figure out that the person standing next to you in the elevator, maybe they're wearing a name tag or something, you realize that they are a recruiter at your dream company. And you strike up a conversation with them, and they say to you, "Tell me about yourself. Are you prepared for an opportunity like this? Could you concisely introduce yourself and your background and your career goals, all in the time of a quick elevator ride, only about 30 seconds?" So if you're not sure you can do that, I would say to you that this 30-second pitch won't just come up on an elevator ride. It is the way you will answer one of the most widely used interview questions, which is, "Tell me about yourself." Also, you will be in a variety of situations, whether it's online networking events or career fairs. There are certainly virtual career fairs that are happening this spring. When you go to write your cover letter, like we talked about last week, this 30-second pitch is a great way to sort of summarize your skills and accomplishments and answer this question, "Tell me about yourself." So we're going to spend the next couple minutes talking about how to create this pitch. So again, it is an introduction. So in your pitch, you're going to briefly describe who you are and the type of work that you're seeking. And then you're going to think about what job or position you're seeking and the top one or two skills that apply most directly to that targeted position. Then you're going to think about a success story or an accomplishment. And these stories really work well because they're easy to remember, and they can explain why you are qualified for the position that you're seeking. Once you've sort of written out your strengths and your success story, take some time to edit it. You want to write it so it's easy to say and understand. And the only way you'll know that is if you actually say it aloud a number of times and then make some changes or some edits. You're going to practice it. You're going to practice it again, and you're going to memorize it so that it's easy for you to recite. And it's not to say that you're going to say the same exact words every time, but you're going to make it so easy that when you're asked to introduce yourself, that this comes very naturally to you and sounds effortless. So I came up with almost like a fill in the blank to help those create their own pitch. And, you know, it's real easy to do, and you can substitute out words, you know, that sound more natural to you and your own style. But essentially you're including your name. If you're a current college student or a recent grad, you would include, you know, what year you're in, or that you're a grad, where you studied, and what you majored in. Next, you're going to talk about what your passion or interest is, and you're going to spell it out very clearly there. If you don't want to say you have a, you know, that you're very interested in something or you're passionate about something, an alternative could be, I'm particularly good at, I have a talent for, my abilities include, I have a solid background in. So there are a lot of varieties that you can sort of insert there. You do want to make sure that you're highlighting your strengths, so you can be really specific about what your strengths are, and then include a brief example. So something, you know, that you did, you know, through a part-time or a full-time job, a volunteer opportunity, an internship. That's where you would, you know, come up with your brief example or your accomplishment or success story. And then, of course, what your goal is. I'm looking to gain further experience in social media, or marketing, or computer science. So, you know, what are your career goals? And that's where you would include that. Questions before I continue? Okay, so what's most important is what you do before the interview takes place. There are a number of things that you can do to try to set yourself up for success. You are going to research the organization by looking at the company website. We talked a little bit about this last week when we talked about customizing your resume. So you're really going to do a lot of research on that organization, the company culture. You're going to read the job description, and you're going to think about how you meet the skills that this position is targeting, so that you understand what it is that they're looking for in an employee, and you're going to sort of either make a list or come up with examples of how you meet that job description. You're going to also be able to, you know, really spell out, you know, how you've developed these skills. So if you develop them in college, you want to be specific about what courses you took, or if you had previous work experience where you developed these skills. You want to be able to describe situations where you have used the skills that they mention in the job description. So as we're talking about, you know, many interviews now are going to be virtual rather than in person. You want to be prepared with your technology before the interview, which means that you want to make sure that you have a working camera and microphone on your computer. Of course, that you have access to whatever software they're asking you to use for the interview, whether it's WebEx or Zoom or a different software program. And you want to make sure that you have a reliable internet connection. So at least a day before your virtual interview, you're going to want to check all your technology to make sure that it works effectively. Next, you want to plan what you're going to wear for the interview. So in a virtual interview, it may surprise some of you, but you want to dress the same as you would in a face-to-face interview. You want to dress professionally, even when you know that you're going to be sitting down, because you never know when someone might ask you to stand up. So you want to wear nice pants and shoes. It also puts you in the right frame of mind before an interview, because dressing the part will help you feel more prepared and more confident. Next, you also want to make sure that you're in a quiet room and you've already tried to set yourself up for success by limiting all the distractions. So you want to make sure your workspace is clear of any clutter. You want to try to make sure that you're not disturbed by people in your household or pets. In an in-person or virtual interview, you want to make sure your ringer is off, that your computer won't be, or any electronics won't be sort of buzzing or vibrating, and that could cause a distraction. So now let's talk about during the interview. So what, if you're in an in-person interview situation, it's, somewhat easy for the person sitting across from you to read your body language. I often recommend to clients that, they try to sit comfortably with their hands in their lap. They're not holding a pen or something else that they could sort of fidget with. You can bring a pen into the interview, but I've been on the other side where I've interviewed candidates and they're, sort of fidgeting with a water bottle or a pen or their phone, and it serves as a distraction. Bottom line is you want the interviewer to really focus on what you're saying, rather than sort of your foot tapping or, you exhibiting that you're, fidgeting. Although it is very, possible that you're going to be nervous in an interview situation, and most interviewers understand that. So it's not that you're, have to be calm and, still, it's just that you're going to try to smile whenever possible. You're going to, if you can't shake hands because you're not in person, or we're not shaking hands because of social distancing protocols, you're almost going to try to, wave or smile, exude this energy and positive attitude the best you can through the screen. So, when you're sitting, you're going to try to avoid slouching. When you lean forward slightly in your chair, it indicates that you're listening and listening closely to what the interviewer might have to say. What's unique about, the virtual interview is that although they might appear to be on, your interviewer might be somewhere in the middle of your screen, you do need to make sure that you're looking at the camera lens. So the best way for you to do that perhaps is putting a colorful Post-it note with an arrow next to the lens. That's, one way to sort of remember that's who you're talking to through the camera lens. And it's really helpful to spend most of your interview trying to look there and not at the person's face in the middle of the screen. Because if you are looking at their face, it might appear as if you're looking down. Always with an interview, you can be honest and prepared to say why the job interests you. You can talk about what you like about the tasks you would potentially be doing, what you like about the work environment, and what you would learn on the job. So sometimes in an interview, it's really hard to sort of understand every question being asked of you. So I would say, you're going to listen carefully, but don't hesitate to ask for clarification if you don't understand a question. You can very politely say, can you please repeat that? Or I'm not sure what you mean by that. Can you say that in a different way? It's also very common sometimes for an interview question to catch you off guard, or one that you weren't necessarily prepared for. So it is okay to say, that's a really good question. I'm going to take a moment to think about it. And you can really take a few moments to think, and that might be a time where you're not maintaining eye contact. Your eyes sort of drift upwards while you're thinking, and all of that is perfectly fine. Whenever you do respond to questions, and we're going to spend a little more time about this on this later in the presentation, you want to back up your statements about yourself with very specific examples. So even when you're asked a closed-ended question, meaning one that might prompt you to say just yes or no, try to elaborate whenever possible and provide more information. At the end of the interview, you should always be prepared to ask a few questions about the job. So, these questions would be focused on the nature of the work. You might want to ask, about the interview process and when you might expect to hear from them, but not an opportunity to talk about pay. When they're ready to talk to you about salary, they'll raise the issue. And of course, if the job seems like a good fit for you, you can tell the interviewer that you would be really excited about the opportunity or that you'd really like to work there. So after the job interview, it's really important, of course, to say thank you, thank them for their time. And even if it's not a position that is appealing to you, it's really still courtesy to thank the interviewer for taking the time to talk with you. And you don't have to fake enthusiasm. If the job isn't the right fit, that's okay. You're just going to say thank you and you'll both move on. But you never know when there might be another opportunity at that organization that would be a good fit. So you do want to make sure that you're polite and courteous. Hopefully it is something you're excited by, so you're going to want to show as much enthusiasm as possible, and follow up with a thank you note or email within 24 hours, ideally. It really shows that that you're interested in the position and that you have this great ability to get things done. So I included a very basic template for a thank you note, because I think it's really very important for whether it's a virtual interview or an in-person interview, to send a thank you note to each person that you met with. And you're going to vary it a little bit. If you meet with 3 or 4 people at the same organization, you might not have wildly different things to include in your thank you note, but you do want to start in your first paragraph, of course, thanking them for meeting with you, and remind them what position you discussed in your interview, and maybe a very brief summary of something that was covered during your interview. Your second paragraph, you're going to really indicate how interested you are in the organization and the position. You're going to reiterate any personal characteristics or other information that's relevant to the position. Remind them how your skills and your experience are a good match. This is also an opportunity in your thank you letter. Let's say there was a question and you in the moment had some struggles in really answering it most fully. So the thank you note is a great opportunity to provide a more well thought out response to any interview question, to further elaborate if there's something that you wish you had said. Your final paragraph will just be a wrap up paragraph. You can include a phone number where you can be reached. And then again, you're thanking them for their time and consideration for the opportunity. And why don't I take a break here to see if there's any questions about anything I've posed so far. Okay. So the most commonly asked questions in an interview are behavioral interview questions, and they're questions about how you've behaved in the past. And when I was a recruiter years ago, I used behavioral interview questions because I thought they were the best way to predict whether a candidate would be a good performer on the job. Since past performance can be a good predictor of future behavior, interviewers ask these questions to see if a candidate has the skills and experiences required for the job. And I'll just read through a couple of the examples I put here. So give me an example of a time when you had to be relatively quick in coming to a decision. Give me an example of an important goal you set and tell me about your progress in reaching that goal. And then I included some questions specifically about working remotely. So if you know that this position, at least for the short term, will be a remote one, you really want to think about how you would perform in a job that was remote. So you need to, even if you haven't worked a remote job before, maybe you took some classes online, or you've done some other work online, that you can really talk about how you would be successful. So even if you experienced some challenges, and there are times when your interviewer is going to try to focus on things that have come up along the way where you were facing challenges, or when you made a bad decision, or they'll ask you the dreaded weakness question. But what's important to remember, that anytime you're discussing something that either challenged you or tripped you up, or when you struggled, is talking about what you learned from that process. What did you learn from the struggle? What did you learn from the challenge? How did you address it? And then hopefully you're going to include an example of a story where you were able to turn things around, where there was a positive outcome, and how that experience helped you grow personally and professionally. Because all of us have weaknesses. All of us have areas or challenges that we faced. But it's through that adversity, how did we deal with it, that makes us stronger, and also makes us, more relatable. So, those that sort of answer the weakness question with "I don't have any" doesn't seem realistic to any interviewer. So sort of come up with some examples of challenges you faced, and how you were able to address them successfully. One of the best ways to start to construct your answers to behavioral interview questions is to use this terrific technique called the STAR interview response technique. And STAR is an acronym for 4 key concepts. Each concept is a step the job candidate can take to answer a behavioral interview question. So the first thing that you're going to want to do in step 1 is describe the setting where you accomplished a task or faced a challenge. So, these situations can be from a classroom experience, a project that you worked on, volunteer experience, paid work experience, or any other relevant event. And remember, if you haven't had a lot of work experience, that's okay. Perhaps you've been responsible for caring for younger siblings. So you've been a babysitter, or perhaps you've been a dog walker, or perhaps you've, worked some retail positions. So even if you don't feel like they directly relate to the position that you've applied for, you've developed some really key skills, including responsibility and caring for others, punctuality. So there are a number of skills that you can talk about from any of these experiences. When you describe the situation, you want to next, talk about what your role was, what responsibility you had. So even if it was a group project, you want to, instead of saying we, you want to talk about what your role was. How did you handle the responsibility in that particular situation? What actions did you take? So you want to say, not what your manager did or your teammate did. You want to talk about what you did. And then, of course, you really want to focus on the outcome or the results. So even if there were sort of bumps along the way, you want to emphasize what you accomplished or what you learned from the experience. And lastly, here's an example of the STAR interview response technique. So, one common interview question can be, tell me about a time when a team member refused to complete his or her portion of the group project. How did you handle it? And here's the scenario that you can describe, because I've heard from so many students that they've had issues with team projects. So when there are team conflicts or issues, I always try my best to step up as a team leader if needed. I think my communication skills make me an effective leader. For example, once I was working on a group project and two of the team members got into an argument and they both refused to complete their assignments. They were both dissatisfied with their workloads, so I scheduled a meeting where we rearranged the assignments for the team. This made everyone happier and more productive, and our project was a success. So you can see that they used the STAR technique because they talked very specifically about the situation, the task, the role that that the interviewee played in terms of rearranging the assignments for the team, and wrapping it up by talking about everyone feeling happier and more productive and the project being a success. So that's a pretty brief example, but for when you think about answering behavioral interview questions, you want to come up with a number of stories, success stories that you can refer to that might apply to a variety of interview questions. Tell me, about a time when you needed to, meet a tight deadline. Tell me about, a class, that you took in college that where you struggled. Tell me about, a new computer skill that you needed to learn. How did you go about it? So, you really want to come up with a lot of different scenarios, from past experiences that you've had. A lot of these questions will also talk about problem solving. So you definitely want, to try to come up with an example from your past where you were effective at solving a problem. And that problem could have happened, sort of at home. It could have happened, as I said, in a volunteer role. It's maybe a club or organization that you belong to. Anything where you can sort of identify a problem, a struggle, something that you faced and where there was a positive outcome. So I will take a break here and see if there are questions. Does anyone have any questions?
Lauren, I'll chime in again.
Great.
You suggest, now that you've given some good suggestions, some practice questions, do you find it helpful to have somebody do a mock interview with these kind of questions? And is there any place that we could go online to find some more of these practice questions, just so that, we have, the more that we can practice?
Absolutely. So, before any interview, it's really can be very helpful to have a mock interview. And I was going to say, as I've said in previous sessions, if you, either attend college or an alumni of a college or university, many times there are resources that are available to you. So current college students might be able to schedule a mock interview with one of the career coaches at their college or university, or alumni might have that option as well. Many colleges and universities also have, other resources available to help you practice interviewing, including questions. So I think it's such a valuable resource, and I would check your college or university career center site first. And then if not, you can certainly Google, there are many websites, and I'll include some of them when we send out the slides so that you have them. But there are a number of them that mention, some widely used behavioral interview questions. And I feel really comfortable that if you Googled behavioral interview questions, a lot of them would pop up. And then, of course, you want to, this is a more general interviewing practice, but, as I talked about researching the organization, perhaps you've also had an exploratory or an informational interview with someone that works at the organization. You might be able to get, to let them know that you have an upcoming interview and try to get a feel from them on, what that interview might be like, what questions you might be asked, or what questions are typically asked. But you want to do your research before any interview, the best that you can. And I agree, Lori, absolutely. Practice, practice, practice.
Yeah. Do you have any calming techniques before you actually, open the camera and unmute yourself, just to kind of calm yourself? Because interviewing is stressful for everybody. Nobody goes into an interview thinking, oh, no problem, we're just going to get right through it. So do you have, maybe a tip or two just to kind of calm yourself and try to focus a little bit?
Sure, absolutely. So for that virtual interview, I would recommend that, before you're sort of seated, that you've used the bathroom, you've had a drink of water, that you've, sort of either stretched or taken, 5 or 10 deep breaths. You sort of want to try to get yourself into a good, quiet place, and whatever that means for you personally. When you're sitting, as I mentioned, you definitely want to try to avoid having distractions on your desk or workspace. You don't want to take the interview from your bed by any means. So you sort of want to be either sitting at a table, a desk, wherever you can sort of sit, where you can sort of limit the distractions, sitting in a comfortable chair, perhaps leaning forward a little bit. And trying to just rest your hands comfortably. And all of that might make you more comfortable in the interview situation. And understand that interviews make people nervous, and that's okay. So if, your voice sounds funny, or an answer doesn't come out the way you'd like it to first go around, stop yourself in the moment and just take a breath. Wait a beat before you answer. Virtually too, there is sort of a lag sometimes. So sort of take advantage of that lag, take a deep breath, and realize that an interview is really just a conversation, and the person, through the screen is just trying to get to know you better. So maybe approach it as a conversation. You oftentimes, no one is trying to grill you, really trying to make you uncomfortable. They actually just want to get to know you better. So sometimes, having the right mindset going into an interview can help. What I always recommend to students or clients who are interviewing for jobs in person is to really make sure that you have an idea of where you're going for that interview. So if if you haven't been to that work site before, you want to make sure that you allow yourself, Waze can give you an idea of what traffic might be, but you always want to aim to arrive 10 minutes early. You want to make sure that you can figure out where the office is of the person that you're meeting. You want to make sure that, if you need to, you can use the bathroom on site before your meeting. There's nothing like sort of running late. And that just sets, a tough tone going into an interview. So, aim to arrive 10 minutes early, try to get yourself comfortable, still again, deep breaths or quiet time before you go into that meeting. And that's what I would recommend as a really good approach to set you up for success. Excellent.
How do you feel about bringing something to drink in the interview?
If you feel like you need it, because otherwise, you might have trouble talking for a long period of time, you can. But too many people sort of play with their water bottles. So just know, how you're gonna feel most comfortable. If you feel like the water is a necessity, by all means, bring it in. Also, if you're offered water in an interview, it's okay to say yes. And it's okay to take a break and drink from your water. You just want to make sure that it's not sort of bouncing around in your hands, or you're not playing with the top or what have you. So you just don't want it to be a distraction, but it's okay. And I know sometimes I have, young students that I coach in terms of interviewing, and their parents want to come to the interview. So I would say, or, a friend comes with you, maybe is your ride, but you really don't want to bring another individual into an interview with you. So even if they were your ride, you're going to have to ask them to sort of wait outside or wait in the car. You want to be the one who sort of, approaches the interview situation on your own independently.
I always find that, the first 30 seconds or a minute of the interview is the most anxiety ridden, and that's when you get introductions. Is it okay to bring something to write with and write on, whether it be, your phone or paper or anything like that, to write down the names if there's more than one individual that you've just been newly introduced to, so that you can write the thank you notes to all of them?
So I would say if you can certainly have a pad and a pen. I would say at the start of the interview, I wouldn't necessarily sort of ask them for their names and the spelling. I would let them sort of lead the interview at the outset, and then generally I would request at the end of the interview for someone's business card. So I would try, unless they say they don't have them, and then you can sort of make note if you'd like. But you can sometimes get that information also from someone's email signature. So I would, I would either stick to trying to ask for a business card, or trying to, see how, of course, if you've met with multiple people and they don't all have business cards, you can go back to sort of your main contact and say, I'd like to follow up with a thank you note to each person that I met. Can you please provide their name and email address so that I can do so? Does that make sense?
Do you suggest that we bring a copy of our resume and cover letter to the interview, one per, bring like 5 copies or 1 copy to the actual interview?
Yes. So I thank you, Lori. Great question. So I wouldn't say you need to bring the cover letter, but I would certainly bring, a few copies of your resume, and you can offer it at the outset of the interview. Just let them know I have a copy of my resume with me if you'd like me to share it with you, and you can hand it to them. Many times, someone's already printed out your resume, but it's great. It's great to have. And I would say that you're doing that for their benefit, not yours. Like you shouldn't be sort of spending the interview looking down at your resume, trying to remember what you wrote. So it's okay to provide it, but it's not necessarily okay to sort of read from it in the interview. You need to be comfortable enough with the information and its contents to be able to talk about it in an interview.
Good. Okay, my final one goes back to virtual interviewing. How do you feel about virtual backgrounds?
Totally fine with them. Absolutely. So anything that's going to make you feel more comfortable as a candidate. So if you feel like your own background is, not something you're comfortable showing, or sort of cluttered, or not positioning you as the professional you'd like to be, you can use a virtual background. You can also use a virtual background if you feel like it is setting a professional tone for you. So as long as, my only concern with virtual backgrounds, and maybe it's just me from home, but some of my students have also said this in the past, where, the virtual background takes up a lot of memory or bandwidth on your computer. So as long as you're, if you have a virtual background and you've practiced before and it sort of doesn't interfere in any way, I'm all for it. I've seen some beautiful virtual backgrounds that can be used very effectively. So just, with all technology, you just want to test it beforehand. You don't want this virtual background to pop up the first time you're in an interview situation. So with anything, practice is key. And hopefully if you have a virtual interview, you can find someone who's willing to practice with you on Zoom so that you can, get their feedback and you can sort of set your reminder to look at the camera lens rather than the person on the screen. It's all really good practice.
Good. Thank you. That's wonderful. Thank you very much. So for all the attendants here, next week, we are finishing up with professionalism in the workplace. And you're going to talk a little bit about email and phone etiquette, as well as looking at our online presence, correct?
I am. And I just see that there is a question that came through the chat. So I'm going to read it. So can you give us some tips to speak in an interview when you were looking for your first professional job and you were from another country? Thank you, Yvonne, for that question. So when you're looking for your first professional job, it's, I'm not sure whether it's even relevant, whether or not you, are from another country. So are you saying that I don't want to guess, Yvonne. So if you want to unmute yourself, is it a language issue? Is it a visa issue? Is it, hi, Yvonne.
Yes.
Make sure you're unmuted. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. No, my question is like, I just came like 1 year ago and I just tried to build my resume and journalist. So I'm just focused on finding my first job, but I don't know how to introduce my experience from Colombia, from my country, to speak in an interview about it. That's like my concern, like how I can express myself in the interview and may look that experience as good as, yeah, I've been working here for several years. I don't know if you understand my idea about how put that in, not only in the resume, but also like that they get the right idea about me and my previous job.
Sure. So great question, Yvonne, and thank you for unmuting and for elaborating. So with any position, you really want to study that job description. So skills are skills. And, if you can demonstrate that you have the skills that they're looking for, and you can back that up with examples, whether you worked in Colombia or you worked in the US, those are experiences that you have that demonstrate that skill set. So, for example, if you, I'm not saying this is you personally, but if you, have handled jobs that required customer service,
Okay.
it doesn't matter where you
Okay. Yeah.
handled customer service, right? Whether it was a busy restaurant, whether you were an administrative assistant, whether you were, a barista, like, you can demonstrate that you have customer service skills in any capacity, in any language, in any country, from any country,
Okay.
because perhaps you worked in a fast-paced environment, perhaps you were addressing customer issues and complaints, perhaps you were answering phones. Think about the skills that would be common from the work experience you have, and really focus on stories that highlight the skill set they're looking for. So if you're asked questions sort of because they don't understand the nature of the work you are doing,
Yeah.
I would say that's perfectly fine. You smile on your face and you patiently explain what that was in a way that makes it really clear. So, maybe they'll ask, oh, I'm not sure what that is. Can you say more about that? And so then of course you sort of want to indicate what type of company that was or what kind of position that was, or if sort of the structure of the company was different. And let's say you were in a position where the title doesn't necessarily equate to a title that we would use more commonly in the US, you sort of feed that information either through your resume or in the interview situation so that it matches more closely to the position you're targeting.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you. Do you feel like that fully answered your question?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. It's just that here is so different from another countries. All the process is different, so I just understand everything.
Yeah.
But it's clear. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. With any of the candidates that are listening to this presentation, the more you can indicate on your resume or in an interview situation that you have the skills and the experience they're looking for, the easier you make their job. You just want to be able to demonstrate where you've used these skills. So if you can do that in an interview, you can do that successfully, you'll be using the interview to your best advantage.
Okay, thank you so much.
Sure, thank you. Any other questions?
Oh, Lauren, thank you so much. That was really wonderful.